Welcome, everyone. Happy to have you with us today. Our guest today is Akash Sethi, our Senior Product Manager. Hi, welcome.
Hey, happy to be here, Deb.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. So, determining patient eligibility and benefits, those are two things crucial for ensuring revenue, right? So, the right forms of automation we know can improve staff productivity and accuracy, and also protect timely patient care, which is a really important part of the equation. But included in that, of course, have to be robust analytics and fast coverage identification and insurance discovery. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So thanks so much. Let's start by kind of setting the landscape. We know there are a lot of solutions out there. We know that healthcare organizations absolutely have to have relief from RCM, revenue cycle management problems and barriers, but they may not know what solutions are best. So let's begin by discussing the two types of technology that are in the market and the best support for patient eligibility and benefits.
Sure. And you'll see this trend across administrative challenges within RCM, where the solutions that have burgeoned essentially are segmented into three types. Two technology ones that you mentioned. One is, we call it pure SaaS, which is just you're buying technology. The other one is technology plus services, or also known as tech-enabled services. And the third one is essentially manual assistance, right? And as we see the trends within the market, there is an increasing penchant towards the technology solution and away from just manual assistance. Within the realm of technology, which option is better between tech plus services or pure tech really depends on the needs of the individual practice. I would say a technology only solution will help accelerate existing processes, whereas a tech plus services approach is essentially used to either replace or augment staff.
So in the case of organizations that have legacy systems, which has to be, the vast majority of them still today, it's not necessarily helpful for them to buy the wrong solution. So, if they want to accelerate, then don't they need technology plus team?
Well, it really depends because on what your aim and goal is. If you have a competent team and you are simply dealing with productivity issues, you can go either route. You can go into a tech plus services approach, but in my experience, more and more practices lean towards a tech only approach because they want something that can help and assist increase productivity within their existing staff. So instead of having to go to 5 different portals to get eligibility and verification for their patients, or 10 different portals, or having to call in some cases, if you have a one-stop shop solution that can provide you all the details that you're looking for with the ease, reliability, and accuracy that you need, I think that increases productivity, increases throughput. And, if you can do so in an accurate manner, I see more practices leaning in that direction. Now, staff shortages is a real challenge in today's world. And that is something that is plaguing not just the healthcare industry, but other industries as well. Practices that are struggling to hire competent staff, which is again a real problem. I feel like they are more inclined to the option of having a tech plus services approach where they're more outcomes focused. So they can hand over, their entire business or a certain percentage of their volumes to a vendor and not have to worry about doing any of that job themselves. They're just concerned about getting the right outcomes.
So we're going to talk more specifically about SaaS for eligibility, and we're also going to talk about benefits. But before we go there, Can you give us two scenarios, one where SaaS would work best and one where tech plus team would work best? And then secondarily, does it also matter on the specialty of the practice and whether it's practice or hospital?
Sure. So going off of my previous response, right? Let's bridge the gap. So we start off with, if you don't have concerns with hiring or your existing staff, you want to increase productivity. Let's say you're acquiring new practices or your patient population has increased or you're growing, you're looking for increased productivity throughput, but you don't want more staff, or you don't want to replace staff. You typically go for SaaS. If you have staffing shortages, you can typically go for BPaaS or a staff or tech plus services approach. But it's deeper than that as well, because one of the biggest value propositions of a SaaS or pure technology solution within the eligibility space is that it's real-time in nature. So what that means is, at the point of scheduling, for example, you can query the solution and you will get the eligibility and benefit details right away, which will help you schedule the patient. Or if the patient is visiting and you want to make sure you collect the patient out of pocket up front, it'll let you do that. However, on the other side, if you're not as concerned with the real-time nature of knowing eligibility benefits, let's say you're doing retroactive batch eligibilities, you just want to get into the habit of making sure your patient population is eligible, you're not really doing it at the point of scheduling. Or if you are, you're in the habit of scheduling, a few days out, a week out, so on and so forth, you're not as concerned with the eligibility. You're more concerned with just reliably obtaining accurate outcomes. You can go the BPaaS or the tech plus services route. And the reason why it's not real time is because for all the cases where the technology is unable to produce a response, you have humans who are going and obtaining those details, right? What happens in a pure automated solution is that the payer will, whatever the payer response is, that will be produced to you. What ends up happening is the payer doesn't always provide all the details that you're looking for, or at times may not even provide a response. And in those times, with a SaaS solution, you have your competent staff, you can rely on them to get the missing information or to get the eligibility benefit details. You don't mind doing that work in-house. But if you cannot do that and you have no inclination towards doing that, then you use a vendor that is tech plus services that can take that burden away from you, right? But because of the human involvement there, it takes away from the real-time nature of always having to provide you, because obtaining, if someone has to go make a call, check the portal, that does take some time. I think I think you had a second part to that question, right, Deb? Can you remind me what that was?
Right. Is one more I mean, you've answered it, but I was curious about healthcare practices versus hospitals.
I think you were asking about specialties too, right?
And specialties, right? Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So another advantage that tech plus services has is that it is more well suited towards more complex specialties and ones that require a non-standard or a more custom set of information. So, for example, let's look at a straightforward specialty like radiology within the realm of eligibility verification and benefits. If you're concerned with, what services are typically being utilized, your MRIs, your X-rays, and you want to obtain your standard benefits such as coinsurance plus deductible remaining, out-of-pocket remaining. I think you can get that very easily from, of course, a BPaaS or tech plus services solution, but also from a purely automated solution. But if you are in more complex specialty, like let's say an orthopedic specialty, like physical therapy, occupational therapy, where you have additional requirements for obtaining information like service limits, service use, are referrals required, so on and so forth, then typically Tech Plus Services vendors are more suited to accommodate non-standard or custom requests, because they can bridge the gap that technology misses with the humans. Now, we here at Infinix have figured out ways to provide that information in the pure software solution as well. So I think that's something that we're trying to create that doesn't exist in the market.
So let's talk specifically about SaaS only for eligibility and kind of do a little deep dive on that. And before we do, I want to remind everyone participating today that if you have questions, please just write them in the chat and we'll answer them as you have them. So SaaS for eligibility, we know it can offer automated responses in real time. It has robust analytics. Tell us about a couple of features specifically when it comes to SaaS for eligibility and the benefits that they bring to a healthcare organization.
Yeah, I think I've been over them in the last few questions, but just a quick recap. I think
Yes, thank you.
You get real-time responses, I think, which has significant impact towards optimizing scheduling at a practice. You get detailed information that is directly available from the payer. So you will get the entire payer response that your staff can look at, pick and choose what benefits apply to the patient. Our solution looks at that entire response, and we have an algorithm that figures out what the most relevant benefits are. But we also provide the entire payer response so that the provider staff can have a look at it themselves and can validate and check if there are any concerns. And of course, the benefit remains within the pricing of these solutions. Typically, SaaS only or software only solutions are cheaper than your Tech Plus Services solutions.
So tell us about the data that these solutions generate. Data is king, obviously. And you've talked a lot about a lot of the details, but when it comes specifically to data, what kind of data mining can these solutions help the practice to conduct?
Sure, and I think I was alluding to a little bit of that when I said a more detailed response is provided. So let's get into the specifics of what that means. I want to divide this question into the request and the response. What is required to get an eligibility and benefits response, and then what is the response, right? So typically, between a software-only solution and a software plus services solution, the request remains the same because you need the same information to provide to the payer. And that's typically, the patient demographics, the provider NPI, patient's insurance details, of course, and the service. So if you're looking for service level benefits, which are essentially either copay or co-insurance, then it's imperative to know what the specific service is. Typically, based on a patient's plan, the response can tell you whether the patient has an active policy or not and what the deductible and the out-of-pockets are. But if you want to know specifically the co-insurance or the copay, it's very important to know what the service is. Is it a surgery? Is it an MRI? Is it a physical therapy? So on and so forth. The other thing that's important to know is the place of service, because benefits vary by place of service. So is the service being performed in an office, in an ASC, in an outpatient setting? So that is important. And let's talk about the response. Typically, the information that is valuable to providers is the information that helps them to then really calculate the patient's out-of-pocket responsibility, because that's what this is really about. And the information that is important is knowing whether a patient has an active coverage with the payer or not, right? So whether patients are eligible for benefits or ineligible. Secondly, the benefits part of it. And there's two types of benefits. There's plan level benefits and there's service level benefits. At the plan level benefits, there's deductibles, annual deductibles, deductible remaining. You have your annual out-of-pocket maximums, annual out-of-pocket maximums remaining. And there's other interesting details about the plan that can be provided that the providers may not have, such as what's the plan name, plan type, is it HMO, is it PPO, so on and so forth. And then there's the service level benefit, which is the copay or the coinsurance. Now, the payer never responds back with one value for each one of these fields, because there's a lot of different permutations and combinations within each one of these benefits, depending on the setting and circumstance of the patient. I'll give you an example. For example, there is a deductible remaining value, but there's an individual deductible, there's a family deductible, there's a deductible for in-network providers. With the specific payer, there's a deductible for out-of-network providers. Similarly, for copay or coins, you have varying copay coins by your service type and by place of service. So you have all these different values that are provided. In a SaaS solution, typically we will provide all the different values so that the payer or the provider will have the transparency to see what they are, but we also have a proprietary algorithm that can crunch those numbers and provide the most relevant and appropriate values to you, so that can then be used to calculate the patient's out-of-pocket responsibility. And I think that's the missing piece, where most SaaS solutions out there don't crunch those numbers into one value. They will just provide users all the different values, and someone has to go read, interpret them, and then figure out what's the most relevant value. On the services, Tech Plus services approach, you typically have the same sort of information provided. We don't delve into all the details of the entire payer response. We'll still provide one value for each one of the benefits. The only difference is in cases where the technology has failed, we will still provide, our solutions can still provide the answer, because the value proposition with these tech plus services solutions is that it's outcomes focused. So you'll always get a response.
So we have a question from someone in the audience. How do you manage medical billing and 271 transactions?
Yeah, I think two parts to that question. I think that the 270, 271 transaction is focused on eligibility and verifications. So the 270 is the request to the payer for eligibility and benefits. The 271 is the response. As I can talk about our solution, and I can give you some insight into other vendors out there. Most vendors use clearinghouses to facilitate that EDI 270, 271 response to and from the payer, because clearinghouses typically have connectivity to a large number of payers. However, the 271 is limited in terms of the information it can provide, and there's a lot of variance and variability in that. So that's why out there you will see a lot of times providers will have experience with SaaS-only solutions where they've used a SaaS vendor, but they're not getting all the benefits all the time, where they're seeing a lot of disconnect between what they hope they would get versus what they're actually getting. I think what we have tried to do to bridge that gap and make our SaaS products, the response, more comprehensive is we've used more multimodal approach, or multiple forms of payer connectivity and automation. So we're not just restricted to using the 270, 271. We have other forms of checking with the payer that when the 270, 271 is not adequate, we can still go to other forms and retrieve the missing information through technology. The other part of the question in terms of medical billing, I'm not too sure what the intent was with the question and how it relates to 270, 271, because once we provide the benefits and the providers use our patient estimation to calculate the patient out of pocket, typically, then they know what the payer due amount is as well. So when they bill the payer, they will subtract the patient responsibility and know how much to bill the payer. But if there's something more specific with respect to medical billing that is I've not answered, please just clarify. I'm happy to take a crack at it.
Right, just put it in the chat. So we have another question. What improvements have you seen when practices bring in either one of these solutions, and can you quantify what they were able to achieve?
Yeah. I think the main metrics that providers are concerned with are productivity and accuracy, right? So how much faster can these cases or these patient visits be processed for eligibility verification and benefits? And then how accurately do these solutions provide the response? Because that's the key piece too. If you're just relying on a solution that is constantly giving you responses, but a bunch of the times you feel like, oh, but this is a wrong deductible value, or this is a wrong Cohen's value, that doesn't work either. And I think then there's some second level metrics that are based on these first two, which is, based on the increase in productivity, how many, how much more, how many more patients can be seen, in terms of optimizing your scheduling. And then how many, for example, if you want to use your staff for more important functions such as patient care, how many staff members can be reallocated, so on and so forth. So
we have another question.
Sure.
How many payers can you interface with?
In our SaaS or pure automated solution, we have payer connectivity to, I think, over 850 payers. I believe it's a little bit more than that. The most recent number, we can provide that exact answer. And then in our tech plus services approach, like I said, I think the value there is that we can do essentially anything there, right? Because if there is a payer that we don't have the electronic interface with, we can have the specialists, the patient access specialists, who can go onto a specific portal, or if it's a really small local payer that doesn't even have a portal, they can actually call that payer and get the answer. So the answer for tech plus services is every payer.
So we're almost out of time, but before we go, you and I wanted to talk about self-care and Medicare patients. There's a lot of money, potential money, hung up in those two categories, but some of them, like self-pay, can be really hard to collect. So can you talk to us about the insurance discovery module and how it can really help providers and hospitals with this fairly difficult, challenging area?
Sure. So, the latest statistics that I've seen within this area state that almost 9 to 10% of patients within the United States identify themselves as self-pay patients, which means they're unable to produce some sort of insurance when they go to a Medicare provider, a medical provider. What makes this hard for providers is that, a large percentage of people in the country are in some sort of medical debt. And, almost, I believe, 40 to 60% of people who are in medical debt default on their payments. They're unable to make payments. So this is direct revenue loss for providers. And of course, I think for the patients, sometimes providers have to turn them away, which is, catastrophic because the patient cannot get the care that the patient needs. So how do we, help both our providers and patients get the care that the patients need, and then that the providers want to provide the patient, right, without having to deal with the financial ramifications? And it turns out that out of that, the number that I quoted, about 10% of all patients are self-pay, about 40%, 30 to 50% of such patients actually have hidden coverage. So they don't even know, but there is some coverage that they could leverage. And that's what the insurance discovery, which is again a pure SaaS or an automated solution, helps providers find. When providers send us just patient demographics, patient address, we are able to, anywhere between 30 to 50% of the time, find hidden coverage for patients. And this is not just restricted to the use case of self-pay patients. This also helps when, when patients provide, let's say, incorrect member IDs, which happens more often than you think. And what happens in those cases is that the provider tries to find active coverage with the payer provider, and the payer is like, hey, I don't recognize this member. But the reality is it's just a wrong member ID. Insurance discovery is able to find the right coverage and provide the right member ID as well. Another use case that is very helpful, or the use case itself is problematic, where the solution helps, is when patients have Medicare Advantage plans. And patients typically don't know what type of Medicare plan they have. So they just come in and say Medicare. And when the provider tries to check against Medicare for eligibility and benefits, Medicare tells them that, hey, no, we're unable to verify this patient because you're actually supposed to check eligibility and benefits against the commercial plan. So that is another area where, if providers are seeing a ton of these Medicare related challenges, the insurance discovery capability can tell them that, hey, you're actually supposed to check benefits against the United entity or the Cigna entity, not with Medicare. And our solution will then go ahead and obtain those benefits as well.
So when you say there's coverage that they may not know about, are you talking about like in Massachusetts, which I'm familiar with, there is a very robust healthcare marketplace exchange, and a patient may be eligible for that but doesn't know that and hasn't applied. Is that the kind of coverage that you're talking about that can be discovered that the patient may not know about?
There's various types of coverages that the patient may not know about, and that could be, let's say the patient is a secondary on their spouse's insurance. They might not know about that. Okay. The patient has Medicare or Medicaid that they had no idea about. So there's various such examples where the patient has no idea that they have some sort of coverage, but there is coverage.
Interesting. Well, we've used up all our time today. I thank you. We've covered a huge landscape today in a very short period of time. So, and I think there's a lot of topics here we should probably come back to and talk about in depth. But thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
No problem. I enjoyed doing this. Any questions, please shoot them to me afterwards. Happy to respond to them. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.